So do you have any narcissists in your life that you have to persuade and respect? Your manager, your boss, someone close to you? They're all over the place. How do we deal with them? How do we persuade and influence them? Stay tuned.
Maximize your influence. Kurt Mortensen is the author of Persuasion IQ, Laws of Charisma, and the best-selling book, Maximum Influence.
All right, welcome back. Kurt Mortensen here, podcast 532. Glad you're here out there persuading with power, make things happen, increasing your income, becoming better at negotiation, persuasion, influence, and, of course, persuasive presentations. Hopefully you're achieving your goals, making things happen. I've been in the Middle East doing some things there. Good food, good people, having a lot of fun. Hey, I say it every time I come back, we're more alike than different. Every time I go to a different country, hey, people want to have friends, eat good food, hang out, enjoy each other's company, enjoy their family, and, of course, to be more persuasive. And we'll talk more about that in a future podcast. But today, that narcissist, are you dealing with them? Do they respect you? Do you respect them? We have to deal with them. They're out there in society. It's not like you can just ignore them. I mean, sometimes you can, but sometimes they're thrust in our path. Sometimes we have to work with them. How do you persuade them? We're going to get into that. But before we do, let's get into the persuasion ninja. So, talking to a neighbor, painting their house, do-it-yourself project, and we were just talking about prep, setting things up. Now, I don't know if you knew this or not. I don't think I even mentioned it, but in college, I painted houses. That's what I did. Had my own business, and I actually kind of enjoyed it. It's kind of therapeutic to go from, ooh, to, hey, that looks good. Anyway, he said he'd run out of primer, and he said he's going to run down to the local hardware store. Now, this local store is closer. There's no doubt about it. It's much smaller, maybe 1/10, 1/20th the size of this bigger store. Again, smaller, more expensive, doesn't have the selection. I said, you should be going to this other hardware store. It's huge. It's massive. It's bigger. It's cheaper. There's more selection. I've painted. I know that's where you should go. He's like, no, I know I'll pay a little bit more and the selection's not quite there. But on the weekends, they give you free popcorn. I'm like, okay, there you go, free popcorn. And so for this hardware store, Ninja for you, you've got the smell of popcorn. People want popcorn. They love popcorn. And we all know popcorn's very inexpensive, again, unless you go to the movie theater. And we've discussed that in a past podcast. Go to the archives, why movie theater popcorn is so expensive. But that's why they went. They knew it would be more expensive. They knew they wouldn't have the better selection, but they got free popcorn. And some people, that's all it takes, a little quick subconscious trigger. It feels good, it feels nice, that's what we like. So take a look at your customer, your prospect, your consumer, the people you try to influence. It's the little things that a lot of times just push people over the edge, that get them to do business with you, that makes you more persuasive. So there's your ninja using the subconscious trigger of smell and one of the laws of persuasion, reciprocity. So before we get into that narcissist, I know you want to hear about that. I've had a lot of questions about that. Let's go to the geeky Scarlet article. This comes from the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Duke University, Dr. Attic and Dr. Sinclair, about how science proves that we are easily deceived by first impressions, and sleep can help avoid those first impression traps. So they go on to talk about conventional wisdom holds that people are easily seduced by first impressions. We know that. And the scientific evidence, and we talked about this, I believe, last week, that initial snap judgments, especially when it comes to misinformations, are hard to shake, even when they turn out to be inaccurate. So there's something about that first impression, the first time we hear something, that it just kind of sticks into our neural pathways, and we don't want to admit that we're wrong or look at other information or even believe other information. So they did this new study that sleeping on it can help us avoid judging a book by its cover. So they start off with this question: is it better to start strong with a good first impression or end on a good note? So they did this study. It was an imaginary garage sale. It was all online. And participants would look through virtual boxes of unwanted goods at this garage sale. And most of the items in the box weren't worth much. There was like an alarm clock, a potted plant, some objects, a lamp, a teddy bear, a few things here and there, things you'd find at a garage sale. And participants earned real cash based on the boxes they chose. So if they could figure out which box was the most valuable, they would make more money. Now, in some of the boxes, all the valuable items were on top. So as the participants unpacked the box, they spotted these items first. Other boxes had their valuable items clustered in the middle or at the bottom, and some boxes had them just intermixed. After the participants had opened the different boxes, the researchers asked them to estimate the value of each one and choose their favorites. Some participants judged the boxes immediately, but others slept on the decision. Then they found this pattern. When the participants had to make a decision right away, they tended to remember and judge boxes not by the entirety of their contents, but rather by the first few items they came across. And they found out something we already know, that people are strongly biased by that first impression. Hey, I've always said with first impressions, the cement dries fast, so you better make that first good impression. Now, can you fix a bad first impression? You can, but most of the times it's not worth the effort, or you might not even get a chance to do that. So back to the article. See, not only did they choose the ones that had the good stuff on top, but they also overestimated the value of those boxes by over 10%. Again, this is primacy bias. So when it comes to forming an overall opinion of something, it turns out we are unduly influenced by the first information we encounter, even when those new facts come to light. And the weird thing was they were unable to recall specifics when asked, okay, why did you choose that box? What's in there? They could remember a few things, but not everything that was in there. But those who participated, who weren't allowed to decide that day had to sleep on it, were less likely to fall into these traps. They made better choices because they slept on it. Now, sleeping on it, they didn't prefer the boxes with the good stuff on top. They chose the boxes that were better than the boxes that were stacked with the good stuff on top. Now, they do say quick snap judgments based on these initial impressions can help us decide when it might be better to move on before we invest too much time or effort. So again, sometimes we need those first impressions, especially if it's a dangerous situation or someone's pressuring to purchase something. Sometimes it's good to follow these first impressions. But when it comes to situations with longer term stakes, the wisdom of sleeping on it before making a decision actually works well. So there you have it. If you're going into a big decision and you're feeling pressured, pushed in a corner, maybe they're using too much scarcity, urgency, sleep on it. I've seen a lot of people, I don't make decisions, I have to sleep on it. I've actually heard people say that, so they know it works. I remember when I used to do telemarketing way back in college after painting houses, that people would freeze their credit cards in ice in the freezer, and they couldn't make the decision till it thawed. Same type of scenario. So there's that primacy recency effect. We are affected by things we see and hear first, those first impressions. We're also affected by recency. That's you were the last person that they talked to, so you were at the end. So if there's 10 speakers, primacy would be first, recency would be last. So when should you speak? Well, it depends. We've talked about this, especially in persuasive presentations, that if you're talking about new material, right, first impressions, they haven't made a decision, they haven't really thought about it, they didn't know much about it, you are going to stick pretty well because you're that first impression. Now, if they are a buyer, a purchaser, an expert, and they're well schooled about what you're talking about, you probably should go last because that will resonate with them more than the first. Just saying, just putting it out there. But still, we have these subconscious triggers, that first impression that we have to follow sometimes and have to deal with others who have maybe a bad initial first impression of us. We'll have to fix it, hopefully before that cement is completely dry. So let's get into our main content. Had this question come up 3 or 4 times last week and the week before, people working with a narcissist, knowing a narcissist. Now we've talked about psychopaths on the show. Go back to the archives at maximizeyourinfluence.com. And it was actually that over 10% of the populations are psychopaths. Now, these aren't the murdering type. They're just a different breed. This is kind of a little subset of that. Let's talk about a narcissist. Now, narcissists, when you look at their traits and characteristics, it often revolves around that need for admiration, that inflated sense of self-importance. They're the most important person on the earth. They don't have a lot of empathy for others. Now, people have varying degrees of this. There is NPD for acronym of the day, narcissistic personality disorder. So what are we looking for here? So when someone's a narcissist, let's talk about that first before talking about how to persuade this person to make sure they're actually a narcissist. When people talk about a narcissist, especially scientists, they talk about how narcissists tend to exaggerate their sense of their own importance. They're unique, they're smarter, superior to others. They deserve special treatment, deserve special recognition, even when it's not warranted. Now, some people say this is arrogance or maybe even entitlement. You're going to see that to where, no, I deserve this more than anybody else. I get special treatment no matter what. I want recognition no matter what. And a lot of that comes from a fragile self-esteem. See, it's interesting with a narcissist. They look super confident, in control, but often they act that way because they have a fragile self-esteem. And that self-esteem's easily damaged by rejection or criticism or not getting the recognition they feel they deserve. And you're going to see them react with this intense anger, maybe even aggressive behavior when their self-esteem, their self-image is threatened. It's almost kind of a cover-up for this low self-esteem. Now, it's interesting with that self-image, they're preoccupied with that praise, getting the admiration, the kudos, whatever you want to call them. They might even get into situations or even manipulate situations to ensure they remain in the spotlight. But they're plagued with that lack of empathy. See, psychopaths have a high EQ, they just don't care. Narcissists really unable to recognize other people's feelings, low EQ, emotional intelligence, really don't care about the feelings, needs of others because their desires, what they want is more important. And that's why they tend to exploit others. Now, they might be nice to you to get what they want and take advantage of you to achieve their own goals. Now, this can be emotional, financial, psychological, and you're going to see where they use others without concern, without any impact, without any remorse. In fact, they expect others to comply with their demands, do what they want. And if that doesn't happen, that's where you see frustration and even anger. And what that causes is these superficial relationships, these shallow relationships where the focus is on how others can benefit them. What can they give them? What can they do for them? And that's hurtful if you've been in a relationship like this because narcissists will discard people when there's no longer a purpose, when you're not even helping me out, when you're not boosting my esteem, there is no longer a reason for a relationship. Because they are obsessed with power and success, and maybe they shouldn't associate with you because they need to associate with people of a higher status, a different status, and that can hurt the relationship. And there's subsets of narcissism. There's grandiose narcissism, arrogance, dominance, power, success. Then there's vulnerable narcissism, where they're very sensitive to criticism, insecurity, and always defensive. And they mask that with that facade of confidence. So you've seen this person constantly seeking validation, pulling others down, belittling them to appear superior, having a hard time with long-term relationships. And you better duck if there's some negative feedback or some criticism. They do not react well to that. So you've seen this person, you work with this person, might be a manager, might be a neighbor, might be someone you need to sell something to. They are out there. Let's talk about how do you persuade a narcissist? Well, you got to get in their shoes, adapt to their perspective. I don't say agree with it, but align your approach with their self-centered viewpoint. It's, especially in a sales situation, it's about them, what they need, what they want. And this can make them more receptive to your ideas when you're adapting to their perspective. I didn't say agree with it, but understand where they're coming from, how their brain works, what they're thinking. There can be a bigger connection there, and that can increase the ability to persuade and influence. And you might as well, positive reinforcement. You can strategically use praise to motivate them to consider your perspective. You could appeal to their ego, where you could frame your request in a way that shows them the benefits that can enhance their image, that they're going to be the hero, They're going to have the victory. Everyone's going to think, man, you're the best, whatever it is. That could be the positive reinforcement. But with that, set those clear boundaries. If they cross the line, be firm. Let them know, nope, we don't do that. We don't tolerate that. I don't go there. Manage their expectations during the conversation, during the presentation, or even before you start. Set up the rules. This is what we're doing. This is what we're talking about. Can keep you on that path of persuasion. Now, here's an interesting one. Most people are more swayed by emotion than logic. Now, remember, a narcissist has low EQ, really doesn't care that much about emotion. You can't plead to their better side to give back, to help out. So you might want to backtrack a little bit and crank up the logic, the reasoning, and maybe reduce the emotion just a bit, because that's not going to sway them. And if they do go off course, say something mean, be calm, be in control, stay confident, stay composed. Hey, they're trying to push your buttons. Don't let them, because if you do, they feel like they're gaining control of the conversation, that they're winning, and now it's time to discard you. They don't need you anymore. Just bottom line, avoid getting emotionally involved. Remember, the goal with persuasion and influence is you're trying to persuade someone how they want to be persuaded. Their brain's wired differently. They think differently. You might not get it, but the more you can start to get it and understand it, the way they perceive the world, the way they perceive you, you can learn how to take them down that road of persuasion and influence. Now, if you're working with a narcissist, maybe this is your manager, maybe it's someone in another department that you need respect from, there are some things you can do that are very similar to persuasion. You still want those boundaries. Let them know what you're going to take and not take. And if they say something inappropriate, call them out. See, narcissists often push those buttons to test the limits, so be consistent, be firm. And you have to have confidence too. Be prepared, know what you can and cannot do. Narcissists respect strength and confidence. So show your self-assurance in your actions and your decisions and your encounters with them. And especially your presentations. They might be the one in the room that's heckling you, says something mean, puts you on the spot, backs you into a corner. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be ready to handle that. Otherwise, you'll lose all credibility with them. Now, if you still want their respect, you're working with them, appeal to their self-interest. Let them know you're on their side. You're there to make them look good. This is a win-win situation. Ask them for their opinions and advice. They love that. Lead them down the path to be persuaded and influenced. That's a great persuasive technique. Hey, what are your thoughts? What are your ideas? What would you do? You're the expert there. Not only do you push the ego button, but you can lead them down the path to persuade them. But let them know you're on the same team. You're working together. It's a win-win situation. And do make sure that you show your competence. You can demonstrate your skills, your abilities. You can teach them something new in the first couple of minutes, at least the first 5 minutes. Narcissists will respect you if you come across as confident, competent, and capable. And this is also a situation you can be strategic with praise, but not too much flattery or ingratitude, as it's called. Keep your work focused on relevant topics, on what the project is, instead of going off on tangents. But hey, you want to be a better persuader, a better leader. You have to persuade everyone. You have to lead everyone. You can't pick and choose the nice ones. You can't pick and choose the ones that think like you. You have to lead everyone. You need to persuade anyone. That is the key to your success. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Let me know at kurt@maximizeyourinfluence.com. That's also the place to send questions, humor, topics you want on the show. Hey, we use anything. You get a free version of influenceuniversity.com, the gold version. You find more information about me and what we do, Influence University. Take your free persuasion IQ test at maximizeyourinfluence.com. That's also the home of the archives. And we're going to continue with the special of the Perfect Persuasive Presentation. So click on the link on the email, go to maximizeyourinfluence.com under podcast 532, or go to presentationiq.com. Take your free Presentation IQ assessment. It's free. Take you under 10 minutes. We'll identify your strengths and your weaknesses as a persuasive presenter, because anybody can inform, but are you influential? Anybody can present a PowerPoint, but are you persuasive? It helps me with my research. It's going to help you. And for doing that, I'll give you the free training on how to create and deliver the perfect persuasive presentation, from the formula to the structure to the delivery. How can you make a difference and persuade more people? So there you have it. Thanks for being here. Take something implemented today. Be more aware. You're working, you're persuading, you're around narcissists at different levels, different degrees. But when you can peg that and adapt to that, man, you can persuade anybody at any time. So become more influential, become a better negotiator, crank up your EQ, and go out and persuade with power.